Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast where a behavioral scientist examines what it's like to live a humorous life. Glimpse into the lives of the funniest people in entertainment, business, and science as your host, Dr. Peter McGraw, explores their habits, motivations, and secrets to success. Get ready to fire up your brain and your funny bone. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast that looks at the lives of funny people. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Zoe Rogers.
Hi.
Zoe's a stand-up comedian. She's been featured on Disney, Babbel, and nickmom.com. And she's performed at the She-Devil Comedy Festival, Laughing Skull Comedy Festival, and Edinburgh Fringe. Welcome, Zoe.
Thank you.
So, Zoe, if you weren't a comedian, and I'm actually going to add this, and a mom,
okay,
because I think it's hard to separate your comedy from your motherhood, what would you be doing?
Crying on the floor of the bathroom. I'm trying to think in terms of like a career. Oh, I don't know. I was acting before I had kids and then drifted into comedy. So maybe I'd still be doing that, but I'd probably just be home with my kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you say that you get a lot of your material from your 3 children.
Yes.
And so tell me about that. Like, are your kids like special in the case that like they're special kids as in terms of are they good for comedy, or is there something special about your ability to pick out the comedic elements of parenthood?
You know, I think everybody thinks their kids are special, but I think for me, it's just my brain it's a strange shift to go from not having kids to having kids and acting like everything that changes in your day is normal, when to me I was like, this is bizarre. Who does this? Who behaves this way? And so for me, I think I started writing about that and trying to make people understand that by comparing, you know, a kid's tantrum to being with a difficult friend or like a drunk person, or, you know. So
you have a bit about how a child's tantrum is like an adult drunk person.
So I have a thing where I say, you know, being a parent was the only job that I've ever had where I got 0 on-the-job training, like 0 formal training.
Yes.
And I just had to draw from my previous life experiences. Okay. Like I'd never hung out with 5-year-olds before, but I'd hung out with drunk girls. And it was pretty much the same thing. They make you late for everything.
Yes.
They insist on wearing. Yes. Yeah. They wear something ridiculous. You know, and the car ride home is always like, "Are we going to McDonald's? Because you said we would." So it was just one of those things where I wanted to make it, because often when you see a comic who's a mom or a dad, people are like, "Oh, mom jokes, dad jokes. I don't care about your kid." So it's sort of like, how can you make that relatable to everybody, even if they don't live your specific life? Mm-hmm. So that's a lot of what I did, was compare. I'd observe things that happened with my kids or in my life and be like, in what other circumstance would this ever be okay?
What are some of those?
Oh, I don't
have kids, so help me understand.
Well, like, for instance, I grew up in New York in like an Irish family, and then I was raising kids in California and trying to be like a very sensitive parent. Oh, yes.
I'm sorry to do this, but are you going to tell the hitting joke?
No, I could. I love that one. That one's a lot more where I say, you know, like, I'm very strict with my kids, yes, and I'm the main disciplinarian in our house, but I don't believe in hitting. Mm-hmm. So I don't hit my kids, but sometimes when they hit each other, I root for different teams.
Yeah, right. I saw that joke. I thought that was...
I love that because I noticed that I was just like, there were days where one of your kids has been really difficult. Like, you're not supposed to have favorites, but somebody says, you know, like, "I love you, mommy," and the other one, you know, says like...
"I hate you."
Yeah, "I hate you."
Right.
Someone goes out of their way to destroy your day. So, you know, you will be like, yeah, I'm going to get in there and say something, but I'm going to let him get one good hit in. He's earned it, you know.
Now, you know, I think like you got like an applause break at for one of those.
Yeah. Well, I think even if you don't have kids, you've been a younger sibling or something like that. Like I've had those moments where I'm like, I'm a good mother. I had it the other day where they were ice skating and my older son kept pelting my younger son with snowballs. He's just bigger and faster and it's not fair. And my younger son was coming over to me and was very upset. And I was saying, you play, you take care of you. And then my older son came over. My younger son was really upset. And I said, come here, stand here. And I said, come here, come hug me. And he hugs me. And I grabbed a snowball and I put it down his pants. And he said, that's not nice. And I said, listen, you can't do that to your brother. And I have to tell you that because I'm your mother, but I also put a snowball down your pants because I've been a younger sister and I know how the world works. Like, you can't just do that. So there are moments where, like, you can tell a joke and maybe nobody's a parent and they don't care, but they're like, oh, I've been in that situation, or I've had a difficult roommate, or what I like is when people come up and they're like, I don't have kids, but I thought you were very funny. And I was like, thank you.
Yeah, well, I guess that would have to be, if you're going to do stand-up comedy and you're going to use your family as fodder, it has to be funny to the non-family people in the room.
Otherwise, nobody cares. I mean, I've been in those situations where you can't just be telling stories about your kid. Nobody cares. Nobody knows your kid. But if you can, like, relate it to a human experience that everybody's been through, then I think people will get on board.
And so what was the evolution of this? So you said you were working as an actor, and then... How did this happen?
I was working as an actor in New York, and then I had my oldest son, and that became increasingly difficult. I was like, oh, it'll be fine. I'll just bring him to auditions. No, he was not the kind of kid you would bring on auditions. And so... Based
upon the snowball story.
Yeah, he would just fall apart. And he's this gorgeous kid, but he was not coming on auditions anywhere. That was not going to happen. And so I stopped doing everything for a while. We moved to LA, and I had a friend of mine from high school who I met in the grocery store. He saw me with my son in the stroller, and he was like, oh my gosh, what are you doing here? And he started pushing me towards taking comedy classes, where he was like, you have to go, you have to write all this down, like this is so good. And
because were you like cracking jokes about it in the aisle of the supermarket?
We'd get together and have lunch and everything, and I would vent about my week to him, and he would always be like, write it down, write it down. And 2 years later, another kid later, I started this class, and it was like the first thing that I had done for myself in years.
What class was it?
It's a stand-up comedy class with Jerry Katzman in LA. And it just changed my life. It was like the best thing that I had done for myself. I hadn't been to a class that wasn't revolving around bubbles and tumbling mats in years. So the idea that I got to go someplace and talk about how I felt about things and like connect with other adults was terrifying, but also like the best thing. And that's how I started doing stand-up. So I did that class, I did the graduation show, then I got booked on some other shows, and eventually I started booking my own shows just because I realized like I needed to keep getting up. If I wanted to get better, I had to keep getting up.
Of course, yeah.
And at that time, there weren't a lot of women on shows. So I'd do a show and people would be like, oh, you're great. We'll call you in a couple months. And I was like, a couple months? Because they would only have like one woman on a show.
Yeah, this is the classic problem with
and it was frustrating.
Comedy.
And so for me, I was like, I got to start a show. So I started doing shows so I could get up every week, so I could get the people I thought were funny up every week. And that was 8 years ago or something.
Did you have a third child to purposely get more material?
No, but she has definitely supplied it. And I was talking to somebody the other day about how weird it is. Like the jokes of mine that I've been most terrified to write, like the jokes that are like the most vulnerable stuff, those have been the jokes that hit the hardest with people.
So tell me more about this. So I'm good friends with a comedian named Shane Moss. Shane, I haven't even had Shane on the podcast yet just because he and I haven't been in the same place. And he has this rule, which is when he finds himself reluctant to talk about something, he forces himself to talk about it. And so this sounds very familiar.
Yes. Yeah.
And so tell me. The thing that made me of this, or what? I want to learn about this.
The thing that made me think of that is when you were saying, "Did you have another baby just to have more material?" Like we struggled to have another baby. It was like 7 years of like fertility stuff, and it was that thing that every time I got up on stage, I was consciously not talking about, and it made me feel like very fake because I was like, that's the secret of the room. The secret of the room is I'm not talking about the biggest thing that's going on in my life. And so one night I was in class because I had done the initial class, and then there's like a writer's group after that for working comics. And I, kind of was like, I guess, in a weird place. And somebody was like, what's going on with you? And I was like, here's what's going on with me. And I launched into this thing that turned into like one of my closing jokes about trying to get pregnant.
I've seen this bit.
Yeah, and it wound up, it was so weird. It's like such a vulnerable thing to do. And I wound up doing it at the Laugh Factory the first night I performed there. And I remember as it was coming out of my mouth, I was like, why are you saying this? Like, you're terrified enough to be here. And now you're saying this. It also has a curse word in it. So I was like, oh no, like this is like way too much information about my life and it's going to get bleeped out. And then a couple days later, it was like their clip of the week or whatever. And I was just like, wow, you go super vulnerable with something and it can pay off. Like, I feel like all my jokes that have done well are the ones that I was terrified to talk about.
Yeah, so this is great. So I know the joke, but tell it anyways, because now the audience is going, well, what the hell is the joke about?
I say, like sometimes kids will overhear things that are meant to be adult conversations and want to talk about them at very inconvenient times. Like when we were trying to get pregnant with my daughter, I think my kids might have overheard some things and they wanted to talk about it at drop-off at school.
Okay.
And I pull up in the carpool lane and from the back seat comes, hey, Mom, I hear you and Dad are talking about having another kid. How's that going for you?
It's just such a funny thing for a kid to say.
Yeah, because an adult would never say, how's that going for you?
Right. They would sort of very seriously be like, so how is that?
Yeah. And kids just don't have a filter and they have no perspective. They have no, And I said, well, if it happens, it happens. And if not, we're very happy with you and your brother. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why he said this, but his response was, I don't think you're trying hard enough.
Right.
And that's a very sensitive subject for a woman. And I wanted to be like, I'm trying very hard. I am having sex like a pirate whore. I have 2 apps on my phone that tell me when to fuck your dad. Back off.
Right.
Mommy loves you, baby. Have a good day at school. Because it is that thing you want to say. Like, I have my 2 reactions with my kids in many different situations where there's like the parent response and like the I was a human being before you got here and I have my own set of emotions response. What comes out of my face is the parent thing. But my inner monologue is like, why would you say that to me? Oh my God, do you know how hard I'm trying? Like, I'm peeing on every ovulation test in Los Angeles. Are you kidding me right now?
So a lot of your stand-up is actually what you can't say to your kids.
Yes. Yeah, the things I'd love to say, but you can't, So I wind up saying them in a microphone in front of a bunch of people.
Yes, who can empathize or sympathize.
Right, and will not be traumatized, whose therapy I will not have to pay for down the line. Like,
right. Yeah, that's right. So how do you have like a particular technique that when you notice that you're scared about something or you're feeling vulnerable, like do you have a system now that you just go, like a vulnerability alert or something?
Well, yeah, if I feel vulnerable about something, I will, not just for writing, but in terms of survival, try to think of like, where's the funny in this? There's got to be some funny in this. Like there has to be, because otherwise, you got to find the humor in situations. Or
being a parent is hard.
Yeah, well, and it's just, I remember at one point I was sitting in a fertility office and it was freezing cold and I texted my friend and was like, it's so cold in here, I'm freezing my eggs just by sitting here. It was just because you've got to find the funny or else how are you going to make it out? Mm-hmm. So for me, I just look for the funny and stuff and I'll say like, well, how could this be funny? How could I make the funny in this? Like omit. And I don't even think you have to take the dark stuff out. I think that the funny can sometimes live in the dark place.
Sure, yeah.
Like,
I think you need the dark place.
Yeah, you need that because you need it to be genuine so people connect with it. Like, I feel like before people laugh, they usually are like, yes, or that's so true. Like, that's usually, it has to hit with somebody because otherwise they're like, I don't believe that. Mm-hmm. It has to be a genuine thing where you're being vulnerable and you're sharing with them and they connect with you and then you both laugh together.
So have you had moments where you tried the vulnerability tactic and it didn't work?
When the joke wasn't ready, yeah. When I was like, I know there's something here, but when you're talking about something vulnerable, that's a big leap. Like usually people take a big risk for a big payoff. Mm-hmm. When you don't, it's all like, to me, in my experience anyway, how it's arranged, how you're saying it, how long it takes, how many details you have. And so I would listen, and it's like so painful to listen to your recorded performances that don't go well. That's like a special kind of hell. And I would be like, okay, this got a laugh. I need to cut out this part. Maybe if I move it, like maybe if this is the last thing I say.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about your choice of pirate whore for that. joke. Did you mess around with that, or did that just land early and then you're just like, well, that's good. I don't need to mess with it.
That's what happens is I record everything and sometimes something's funny and I don't remember. I think my son, this is a horrible thing to say, was watching a lot of Jake and the Pirates.
At the time.
Yes. So I was inundated with like, like all the Jake and the Pirates stuff. And in my head, I was like, yeah, they're omitting a lot about the pirates. And it's like, I remember being like, there's nobody here with scurvy. Nobody's dying of venereal disease. There's no like scrawny pirate whores in Jake and the Pirates. And so that's what came out when I was like, I am trying very, in my head, because you can't say to a kid like, I am trying hard. It's not like I forgot.
Yes.
But yeah, in my head, pirate whore came out and that hit in the audience.
No need to fuss around with that one. That's pretty funny. So your friend was telling you to write it down. Saying, write it down. So do you have like a writing system? Like, do you have a notebook? Do you have?
My husband makes fun of me because he, how when you go to shows or mics, you see comics take out their phone and they're like, I'm just looking at my notes.
Yes.
I'm not good like that. So I just have like stacks of paper around my house that look like serial killer notes where I write things in big letters.
Okay.
Like my set.
Like on napkins or on
on anything. Or... Usually it's just like basic paper and I scrawl out my stuff. Or throughout like the week, if I think of something and I'm with my kids and I can't write it down, I'll just email it to myself.
Okay.
And then at the end of the week, some of the stuff is great where I'm like, oh, that's so good. I have to talk about that. And other stuff is like, what? That's not funny. That's never going to be funny.
And do you have any of those scraps with you right now?
Oh, yeah, probably. Yeah.
Yes, you do. I can see some. Let's pull them out here. Let's see what you got.
It's horrible. I've left them at home when I've gone out to shows and come back, and the babysitters put them out, and I'm like, oh no, what is this? Because it's usually just like a couple bullet points.
Sure.
Oh, is this blank? Let's see. Here we go.
Okay.
No, this is my
so for the
set from the other night.
Okay, so for the listener. This would be like, it's in like 32-point font that you've written these things.
It is.
Can I look at this?
Sure, go for it.
All right, so just had a baby. That's on the Navy SEALs. Got Pulp Fiction nursing. 2 different kids. Sweep the leg. Sweep the leg is the part of the hitting joke, I know. Penis aisle. 5th grade volunteer. That's another bit I've seen you about being cool with 5th graders.
Yeah. I don't know why I cared, but I was like, I need them to think I'm cool.
Son-in-law, and then your pirate whore closer. So I have to, God, there's so many of these I want to ask. I want to ask about Navy SEALs, and then we'll talk about penis aisle if okay. So what's the origin of Navy SEALs?
Navy SEALs is where... I talk about just the difference between having one kid and having more than one kid. Mm-hmm. And it's just vastly different. Like, to me, it just felt like I was never on top of anything. I would see people with one kid and they were having this nice organized existence. Okay. And I was just barely staying afloat.
With one, you were saying?
Yeah, when they had one and I would have 2 and now I have 3.
Okay.
And so in the joke I say, there's a big difference between having one and having more than one kid.
Okay.
And the parents of more than one kid tend to view the parents of only children the way the Navy SEALs look at the reserves.
I see.
Like, we appreciate what it is you do.
Right.
But we have seen shit that will change you.
Right, I see. Okay, so having like 3 kids is being a Navy SEAL.
Yes.
I see.
Yes.
It's I have friends who have 4. And I think they should have 4, right? Like they're good people and they can afford 4 and all this kind of stuff. But I remember the line that my buddy had, which was like, he's like, I used to buy seats on an airplane. Now I buy aisles.
Yep, whole rows.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
A row. He says I buy a whole row.
Yeah, the way you think is just, I'm the baby of 4, and I keep thinking, like, how did my mother do this and not lose her mind?
Well, I think that's why. I mean, I grew up on the East Coast, Irish Catholic family.
That was me too, yeah.
That's where the hitting... There's a lot of hitting.
Yeah, we didn't have a lot of hitting, and I'm surprised. Like, because I was talking to my sister recently, and I was like, my mom never, really lost it with me. Uh-huh. And I just remember being like, how did she do that?
That's impressive.
Like, that's with 4. I think maybe she was one of 7, and probably her grandparents were one of 12. So to her, she was like, this is a nice, neat sized family.
Yes, I see. And penis aisle?
Penis aisle was that I was at Walgreens with my husband, and he was commenting, this is what happens when you're a comic, like everyone around you wants to say something funny and be like, you can keep that.
Yeah.
And my husband's an attorney, so like he will try to chime in with witty things. So we were walking around Walgreens, and he was commenting on everything I'm putting in our cart. And finally he looked around and he was like, they shouldn't call this the personal care aisle. They should call this the vagina aisle.
I see.
You guys get all these washes and lotions. We don't have any of that. That's not fair. Mm-hmm. We deserve a penis aisle.
I see.
And I said, you don't have a penis aisle because the world is your penis aisle. You don't have a penis aisle the way white people don't have a history month.
Right.
Like, it was just this idea that, like, he felt like it was unfair they didn't get a penis aisle. And I was like, you have Congress. Yeah, like, what, are you kidding me?
Funny.
You used to have Congress. Anyway, it was just one of these moments where I was like, what? And I wound up saying it on stage because I was so frustrated. Because also usually things that happen in my life are somehow echoed in like what I'm dealing with when I go to do shows. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, there have been many times, where I'm dealing with entitlement with my kids. And I'm trying real hard to get them to come out of that, because I will occasionally work with very entitled adults.
Yes.
Where I just want to be like, you can't grow up to be one of these dudes who talks through everyone's set, shows up late, insists on going next, and then leaves. Like, don't be that guy.
Yes. Right. And it's usually a guy, is your point.
Yeah. It was just the idea of not.
It's always a guy.
It's always a guy.
It's always a guy.
But and I felt like I was seeing some entitlement too, and I'm not one of those people who get up and be confrontational with an audience or with another person, but I could talk about my own frustrations in my family life, what I'm seeing in my kids, or what I'm dealing with my husband, and that can echo with other people.
Yeah, I mean, there's some of the stuff is you're connecting it to the real world.
Right.
So, the Navy SEALs, Congress.
Yes, yeah.
So it's funny because your comedy is fun, it's playful, but it's about difficulties.
Right.
It's about these challenges. So you took this Jerry Katzman stand-up class.
Yes.
You got to look into how to do this, cut the learning curve,
Yeah, that class, I have to say, like, if you take a class where they're like teaching you how to write and how to work with other people and, give them punch-up lines, I feel like you move a lot faster as a comic as how your material evolves, because you've got nice people being like, you know what, I want to hear more about this, but I felt like you lost me here, instead of having to learn that over 3 years of rough mics or shows.
Yeah, I think that's great. I'm a teacher, so I think you can teach difficult things.
Yeah.
And so now you're doing some instructing yourself.
Yeah, since I came here, I started doing, I helped with class there in LA. Me and a couple other people would sit in and help with new classes that came in. Yeah, it made me feel like the comedy TA, and it was so much fun. Mm-hmm. And when I had spoken to him, he was like, when you go, you should probably teach. He's like, because you're gonna get frustrated. You're gonna not see the diversity you want. Mm-hmm. And he was like, you're gonna have to create that diversity.
This is Jerry was telling you this.
He was like, when you go there, you're gonna have to teach just to create the comics that you want, to have more females, to have more gay comics, to have more, comics of color, to have more trans comics, whatever might be lacking. So when I got here, I didn't hang up a shingle, but hung up a microphone. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing some teaching, and I really like it.
So tell me about the class. So, like, what's your syllabus like?
Well, it's less of a syllabus. I don't really have a syllabus. I ask people to come in and like answer in advance, like just like an essay. Things that make you crazy. Uh-huh. What are your pet peeves? What are like your nasty, naughty little, pleasures? Tell me about your life. And then I sort of tease through it and find the funny in it.
Okay.
And I'll say, like, I think this is funny. If you work in this particular division, it would be funny to hear, things you can't say at work. And I just talk with people about what's relatable and funny.
Is this one-on-one? Is this a class? How are you doing this?
It's a class, but it's a very small class. We only have 2 people.
Okay.
So it's 2 hours every Wednesday, and basically each person gets an hour, and we pour through their stuff, and I have them get up on the microphone and go through it, and then we talk about, Because a lot of what can happen if you don't write things down or record things is you get up and you say it one night and it kills.
Yes.
And then you get up the next night and you're like, that got nothing. Why did that get nothing? And it's all about the arrangement of how you're saying it. So I was like, you need to record this. You need to write it down. You need to memorize it like your phone number so that when you get up and the nerves hit or whatever the case may be, the anxiety, you just know it. And it just rolls off your tongue with the cadence you've memorized. And it's fun. It's fun getting people to like, because everybody always starts off saying, I'm not funny. I'm afraid I'm not funny. I'm one of those people who's just not funny. And those people are very few and far between. So it's fun to help people find their, find what makes them funny.
And you have 2 students right now. And what are their motivations? Like, why are they doing the class?
One of them, they've been drawn to comedy. And I think that they don't see a lot of women in comedy, and they want to get up and do comedy. It's 2 women. And I think that, it's just people get bombarded a lot with like what the image of somebody, a comic, what I hear a lot is you don't look like a comic. And so I think maybe they came in because of that, because they were like, I think I'd like to do that. You get presented with this one image of this is what a comic looks like. This is what a comic talks about. And I think that's bullshit. I think that comedy can come from any perspective, and it should. You shouldn't just present one viewpoint and be like, and that's a comedian.
Yes, that's right. It would be like saying that, because Impressionist painters were French,
right? That this is art.
French to be an artist, a painter. Yeah, I certainly.
So I think they wanted to be like, am I funny? And I was like, yes, you are. You're very funny, and your voice is important and should be heard. And like I said, there are some programs where people do stand-up comedy to just sort of like have it as like a one-off, like I did that like a pottery class or whatever.
Yeah, I went skydiving or something like that.
Yes. And I was like, I want you to leave this class with a done set that you can go out and perform with and, apply to festivals, and you can create some diversity in the comedy scene. I want to go up and see you in a show and hear somebody walk out of the audience behind me and be like, she crushed. Like, I love that. I love when people are surprised by like the underdog. And I had somebody say something really funny the other night after a show. It was nice. The guy came over and he was like, you were so good. You were fantastic. You were so funny. That was so unexpected. I did not see that coming.
Yeah, that's such a
I don't want it to be
comment.
Like, can I stop you and ask you what that means? But what does that do? I look especially unfunny. But I do think it's just that people think a comic looks this one way and they talk about this one thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly if the nature of stand-up in particular, and how welcoming stand-up is for men, and men of certain varieties and so on, that when you look at like the greats, because
they tend to look a certain way,
and behave a certain way, and then of course if you lack role models, then it's if your role model doesn't look like you or is not interested in talking to you or is trying to have sex with you,
right? Then you give up on the whole thing.
It becomes hard. It becomes hard to do. And then if you're going to take a class and all the classes are taught by men and and so on, I get it. I had recently had Jen O'Donnell on, and she has I think a monthly show called The Ladies' Room.
Oh, nice.
And it's purposely all female. It doesn't have to be, but it's typically all female comics. And she talked about how it helps create a space where you can try material and work it out so that that you can make a crossover.
Yes.
And the idea that it hits with women first and then you work it so that it can hit with men. And she said something that I thought was really striking, and I never thought about it this way, and that is that this is to your penicile observation, is women have a male viewpoint because they tend to live in a man's world. Men don't have a female viewpoint unless they happened to be raised in a female world. And I thought that was like a very interesting, which is why it's easier for a male comic to be funny to men and women than it might be for a female comic. It may take more work or take more revising in that way. And I thought it was a really striking observation.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think one that I do believe is true.
Yes. Yeah. And I love that she has an all-female show. I had done a bunch of shows in LA, and they were almost not, I mean, some of them were to get up myself and get other people up, but some of them were in response to conversations I'd had with different bookers where they would say like, well, I would book more than one woman, but like, I don't know that many. Are there that many? And so I would be like, there are so many, I'm going to run a monthly show with new ones all the time. And then guys would say things like, well, I just book who I think is funny. And it was like, well, I think who you think is funny is very much influenced by like who you're drinking with after the show, or, does this person have my exact life? So you want to create, I had a show that I started in LA called Token Straight White Dude, where we would only have one straight white man every show, because I would also hear from people like, people say I need more diverse people, but like, I don't, how many, female Asian comics are there? And I was like, actually, how long of a list do you want me to give you?
Right.
Like, there are many, and they're hilarious, and like, you should come have them headline. So I would do that with both of those shows, because it was like, if you can't find these people, go through my flyers.
Well, also, to me as a business school professor, I'm just struck by what bad business.
Oh, it's horrible business.
Right? Like the idea that if every comedy club is just playing the same kind of comics, now you're competing against each other, not on the quality of the show, but on what you're charging for admission or how many drinks that you have to drink or whatever.
Yeah.
And so the key element to business is to be differentiated, to be different.
What makes you different? Yeah, you're like every other comedy show. And the other thing about female shows, part of what I love is like, I can't speak for everybody, but for myself and some people I write with, you do feel like if you're the only woman in a lineup, even if it's a dive bar show, you're going to do your A-list stuff, because you don't want somebody in the front to be like, see, I told you women aren't funny.
That's interesting.
Whereas I've seen guys get up and be totally, so comfortable that they're totally unprepared. And they're like, what else? What else? What else was I going to tell you? This guy in the front's on his phone. And it's like, that's a luxury.
Yes, I would, interesting.
So when you do female mics or female shows, you can get up and be like, okay, here's my B-list stuff where I know there's something there. And you don't worry that anybody's leaving being like, see, women aren't funny.
Yeah, that's funny. That's really, I think that's a really interesting observation in terms of the freedom that you can create by creating a place that...
Yeah. And I've also had women say to me, like really funny women be like, I didn't want to do my spot at the end of this show after listening to 40 minutes of date rape jokes. Like, I didn't feel particularly welcome, And I was like, okay, I understand that. I can, if you feel like you're following a hostile thing, it's hard to get comfortable. But if you have a show that's like more diverse and there's like every perspective, then you're like, everybody deserves a chance to get up here and have their voice.
Yeah. So... I want to ask you some questions, a little more rapid fire.
Sure.
We can, kind of thing. So you are a mom, a wife, a stand-up comedy teacher, a stand-up comic. Those are the 4 major things in your life? Am I missing anything?
No, that sounds about right.
So what are you saying no to, right? What's trying to find its way in to that, into your world, and you're like, nope, this is enough?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I am not really somebody who sort of says this is enough to stuff. I sort of tend to bite off more than I can chew and work backwards from there.
Okay.
So I don't know that there's anything I'm saying no to. There's projects that I'm working on that I love, that I'd love to be further along in.
Okay.
But I'm not, because of, helping people with homework and setting up play dates and that kind of thing. I don't sleep a lot. Maybe sleep is the thing I'm saying no to.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's funny. That's unfortunate, too.
Yes. Yeah. The other night after I had done a joke, I just paused and said, you guys, I haven't slept in so long. And thankfully that went well. Yeah, no, I think there's lots of stuff. I love doing creative things. I feel like that's really lacking. I see, I hang out with adults who aren't comics, too. Mm-hmm. And I feel like when you stop doing creative stuff, I feel like life is not as much in Technicolor. It's so fun to connect with people. One of the things I love about comedy, and part of the reason I love the writing process, is like people come together and you get to know them very quickly, because they're like, I want to write this joke about this vulnerable thing that happened to me. And then you go back and forth and they have this great joke. Whereas in the real world, it could take years for someone to share something that candid with you.
Yeah. So, as an aside, I agree with you. I actually think that creative work is this underutilized, underappreciated path to living a good life.
Yeah.
And that most people never give themselves a chance to develop creative muscles.
Yeah.
They're too busy consuming other people's creative work, which is easier.
Yeah.
But less fulfilling.
Yeah, I feel like people sell it as like this thing that you do in middle school or something, and then you got to get a real job. And I think it's so nice because for me, anyway, part of the reason I love comedy is as a parent, I felt like every other adult I met acted like they had their life together and they had it all figured out and this was exactly what they thought it would be and it totally fulfilled every aspect of their being. And I did not feel that way. And so it was nice to go from hanging out with people who acted like everything's fine, I've got everything together, to being with people who are like, here's what's weird and broken about me. Can we find a way to laugh about it? Like that was much more real to me.
Yes, I can imagine. Next question. Do you have a rival, enemy, frenemy of some sort, some type?
I don't think so. Not that I know of.
Well, you would know it, no?
I was going to say, I generally am a pretty nice person to work with, so I don't think I have rival frenemies. I've worked with unpleasant people.
Yes.
Who I wouldn't work with again.
Okay.
But nobody that thankfully they're not somebody that I see in shows I feel like when you're unpleasant, that gets around and that hampers your potential.
Chris Mazzelli, who runs the Gotham Comedy Club, when we were working on the humor code, we interviewed him and he just simply said, don't be an asshole.
Right.
Like if you want to get ahead in comedy, be nice to people.
And it's also a really small world. I mean, if you're terrible to somebody, people are going to find out, and there you can make arguments about, there's two sides to every story. But if you know people and one person is a reputable individual and the other one isn't, I think that sort of speaks for itself. Mm-hmm.
So as an instructor of comedy, as a comedian, you get better with practice and experience and so on to take your comedy class to the next level, to make it Katzman level. I
don't know that I'd ever be Katzman level, but he's phenomenal. He's definitely something to aspire to. I love him.
What is it that you're having to work on? Like, how's it stretching you?
How's it stretching me? Well, it's funny. Like, his classes are bigger. They're like 10 people, and mine is 2 as it unfolds, and I'm finding that's pretty good for me right now. Okay. Because I really do like to delve in with people and, like, pick all the pieces out. Okay. What I have to work on with people, I think...
Or just like this, I'm always, for me, after we finish, I'm tidying up a lecture, and I'm always kind of making little changes to a course that I think is pretty good. Yeah. But so those.
I think for me, it's like, I don't know. I love working with people. What I have to work on is probably just like, and I haven't run into this so far, knock wood, is just being direct. If I'm like, no, that's not funny. Like, that's just offensive. You're only going to alienate people. There's no angle at which you can make. But those things are so limited, and I've never run into them with the people I'm teaching. And when I've been helping in classes, I've very rarely seen them. But I guess...
So how do you give that feedback?
To give that feedback. But I've never really had to do that. I mean, thankfully, when I was in LA and I was in classes with Jerry, he would say with people like, you know what, I really like this better.
I see. So he just steered them.
Yeah, it was a very good positive reinforcement of, I love hearing about this. I want to hear more about this. The other thing, not so much, but I love this. Instead of saying... Why would you, something that was either racist or sexist or homophobic or something. And sometimes I really did love that he would be like, I think we're feeling a little racist with that. So I don't know that we want to do that. So I love that. And I think I might go that route if I ever run into it, is just because I tell my kids to do that with things. I say, if you hear somebody say something sexist, racist, homophobic, say that's sexist or that's racist or that's homophobic. And I realized when I heard that I was like, yeah, just call it out with humor. Be like, all right, so we're being sexist, I guess. We're not going to use that. But let's move on to the next thing.
Do you find that with your students now you have the opposite problem where you want them to sort of turn up the darkness?
A little bit. I mean, I think because it's women and they both work in like nurturing professions, I'm trying to be like, you can say things here. Like part of the fun of comedy is that you can say things into a microphone that you can't say to other people. And I think one of them had said the other day, her worry, she said, I don't want to seem like too much and too angry. And I said, that's a thing women worry about. They like, you don't see a lot of women like doing Lewis Black type stuff. Yes, because they'd be like, oh my gosh, this angry woman. So it's like, I said, it's frustrating because you got to play on the edge. You got to be edgy, but not too edgy. You don't want to seem angry. You want to seem clever. And, I said, it's frustrating, but we'll toe that line. You should, unleash what you're frustrated about. Don't do it for 25 minutes. Sandwich it between, an act out and a premise. But yeah, I'm probably trying to push them more towards like, no, really tell me how you feel. My brain goes to like the extreme where I'm like, how's the silliest we can be with this? And then we'll reel it back in. But let's go peak silly and then scale it back down.
Yeah, I mean, certainly this past year, Hannah Gatsby's Nanette really cut through the clutter because she basically, I'm not sure if you've seen it yet, but
I haven't seen it, no.
Special. So
I've heard great things, but...
Yeah, she basically starts it's exactly this point where she starts doing a traditional stand-up show, and then she stops telling jokes for the second half of it, and she gets very real and talks about even how she has to hide the truth in order to make some of the jokes funnier, and then she tells the rest of the story. And I think that the critiques of that are going to be the standard variety of look at this angry woman kind of thing. And yet, I mean, critically, it's been incredibly well received and has made her a name in the world of comedy in a way that probably wouldn't have happened if she just did a standard kind of set. But it was so...
Yeah, I think it's brilliant.
It was really... I mean, basically it became a comedy show that became an anti-comedy show. And I think it really exposed that challenge that I think the women have especially.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I feel like any woman who's ever had a clip featured on the internet, right? There's like a threefold response where it's like, oh, I got featured. That's so awesome. And then it's like, oh, no, there's this horrible thing called the comment section and men. And so like the third fold came for me. I had something go up on the internet and I had that thing where I was like, oh, yay, because it always happens on a day when nobody's listening to me and no one can find their shoes and my kids are just being rude. And I'm like, oh, somebody likes me. But then there's the comment section. But the third fold for me was that the venue, it was Laugh Factory, like clapped back at these really sexist, awful comments, which was awesome. But it does happen. I feel like there are people who are super invested in women not being funny. And they hate the idea that that's
like
a thing.
Zero sum in some weird way.
Yeah, and it's always either, oh, she's just talking about her boring life, women aren't funny, or women always have to talk about sex to be funny. Why do they have to do that? Or they, it's like, are men talking about quantum physics? Like, they're talking about the same things, but you find them funny, but you're just very invested in women not being funny. And it's so frustrating, but I feel like it's driven the women I know to work harder and to have tighter stuff. But it's not fair to say like, yeah, this guy can tell the same joke she told and I love it, but when she does it, it's too much. It's too much. It's
a weird, that this sort of zero sum world that it's like there's a world of funny people and a world of less funny people, and the less funny people can become funnier if they work at it. And there's no reason to believe that gender or anything else has anything to do with it as much as it has to do with hard work and intelligence and creativity, right? And developing those muscles.
Yeah.
So your kids are important to your success, right? If they're not
as a person, certainly,
saying and doing these weird things, it makes it that much harder to get material.
I don't know. I feel like I'm sort of an awkward, weird person, so maybe that stuff lends itself to things that I write about.
Well, I'm just saying is like, who are those important people? So it sounds like Jerry Katzman was important to you.
Yeah, I love Jerry. I have people that I met in his class who are working comics who are awesome that are hugely important to me.
Who are some of these people like? How do you cultivate those relations? How does that, like, I think the reason I'm asking this question is I think people think of stand-up as this very solitary pursuit. And yet, the more you learn about stand-up, the more you realize that other people are necessary for success.
Yes.
So the audience is necessary. You need the previous audiences to make the current audience laugh. There are the people who book. There are the people who give you notes, etc. So I'm curious about who some of those people have been for you.
Jerry is definitely the top of that list because I took his class. My friend Daniel Leary recommended I take his class, and That was life-changing. People that I met in his class that are working comics that I text with a joke or a problem or whatever, Tamara Katan, Christopher Smith Bryant, Heather Pasternak, Nina Manny. There's like many people. Dave Williamson. There's lots of people that I...
And they might offer a punch-up or an idea.
Yeah, they offer a punch-up, and it's, people think of stand-up as a very cold, tough world. I have people say to me all the time, like, what makes a normal person like you want to get up on stage in front of a bunch of strangers? That sounds terrifying. And I sort of have two answers to that. And like the funny one is like, my children are worse than any heckler. Like hecklers have nothing on my children. I could get up in front of these people and it, to me, I got out of the house. I'm talking to grownups and nobody's asking me where their shoes are. So that's a win. I get to connect with adults. But the less probably funny answer to that is I feel like I've been very spoiled in that I started doing comedy through Jerry's class and meeting people in the LA community that way. And that's a very warm introduction into the world. It's very supportive. And I feel like in my experience, comics are a lot warmer and more welcoming than sometimes moms I would try to pick up at a playground. There's a lot less judgment.
That sounds like a bit.
Probably. I mean, I feel like the mom scene can be a really brutal octagon where they can be like, you didn't bring an extra applesauce? You didn't know you were going to be here an extra hour? Or, you just feel like you're constantly not getting it together. Whereas comics will be like, that's great. Talk about that. That's a mess. I want to hear, comics will be like, you broke up with somebody? You lucky. Like, you're going to have an hour, or you got kicked out of your house. Oh my God, you're going to have they feel for you and they want to help you write about your real feelings, but they're also funny. Like, oh, the wealth of material you can draw from.
I'm wondering if I could come up with where I read this. But I read something recently that was sort of, these are my words, not the author's words, how oppressive parenthood has become. Mm-hmm. The idea that like when our parents, I'm a Gen Xer, right? So like I was a latchkey kid and all that kind of stuff. Like that the parenting wasn't as hard back then.
No. Yeah.
You could let your kids just go out into the world and you know what I mean? There was this thing and like now that it's like everything has to be so perfect.
Right. And it feels like a competition or a pageant where I'm like, why are we, can you not just be, I assumed that in the parenting world, there was going to be this great deal of support because it's so hard and it's so high stakes. But then I found it to be very much the opposite. And I found nice supportive people, but I have to say I've had more support from my friends in comedy, just sort of like coming through with things and not judging me for stuff.
Uh-huh. So then you're saying that your rivals, frenemies, and enemies are not in the world of comedy.
Oh, no. I mean, I don't know. I think enemies and things are for people with more time than I have.
That's a great quote. I don't have time for an enemy.
I don't really have. I mean, I've had people who have been not nice to work with, but then I don't work with them anymore, and I don't tend to see them working with anybody else either, so word gets out.
You don't set up play dates over that house.
No. I mean, I have the same policy for, like, adults in my life as I do for the play dates, where it's like, you got to play nice in the sandbox, you can't be nasty, you can't... And that was sort of one of those fun things when I did shows in LA, to have that sort of policy of, like, you have to be nice and to take really rough rooms. I ran a show in the back of an Irish bar for years, and it felt very weird to go back there, but I felt like the show changed the energy to like a supportive place.
Yeah, I see.
So, I mean, I like doing that, changing the energy of something to be supportive. Like comedy is not like a punching down, picking on people thing. It should be like, oh my God, that was so weird when you said that thing. That was so strange. I loved it.
Yeah, that's great. I'm always thinking, at various times when I'm doing these podcasts about what the title of the podcast will be, like I'm kind of searching for a thing, and there's an idea for this one around like community or support or something. I don't have it yet, but
I always feel like comedy is a very healing thing, and I don't know who said this, but the quote that laughter is the sound of people realizing that they're not alone.
Okay.
I love that because it really is that sense of like, I'm weird and this is strange and what's wrong with me? And then you go someplace and somebody says that they're dealing with the same thing in a microphone and you're like, yes, so true. Like it has to be true to really hit you and be funny. But I find comedy very healing for me anyway. And I find like the people I love in my life that I've met recently through this, like it's been a fast track to connecting with them because it's very real, very quickly, and very genuine. I think probably my problem with some adult interactions that weren't based around, comedy or whatever, they tend to not be very genuine. People put on, it's like your Instagram life or whatever, like everything's perfect and da-da-da.
It's just so great.
So I like having real things with people because you connect that way. And it also makes me feel like, oh, I'm not the only one who doesn't know what I'm doing here.
Yeah, that must be nice because otherwise you just feel like this imposter.
Yeah. I always say every adult I know is Googling their way through life. Yeah. Like that's just the reality of life. Like nobody knows everything.
Yeah, there's certainly, it helps explain why there's so many parenting books.
Oh, God, yes. And I don't know who has time to read them. People buy me these books and I was like, get books on tape because I don't have time to read this. I'm going to open this and somebody's going to run in my room with a crisis.
That's right.
Somebody's going to throw up on this book. That's what's going to happen to this book.
That's so funny. Last question, and you may not even be able to answer this question given what you have going on, but what are you reading, watching, or listening to that really stands out? Clearly, it's not a parenting book.
I've been listening to The Moth a lot.
Okay.
I love The Moth. I love hearing people tell like their real stories. So when I drive home from shows, that's what I listen to is The Moth.
Okay.
I love it. I wish I had time to be reading something. I love reading and I just haven't had a chance with moving and getting kids in school. But usually I love to read filth and I haven't run across any of it recently.
Do you have like a classic filth book that you loved?
I like them all. I like all the horrible...
Like what is an example of this though?
For a while, my phone was full of Outlander and 50 Shades of Grey.
Okay.
Like my photos are of my kids, but like my book section is not like parenting because it's all, life is about balance. So yeah, I guess I'd love to be reading something. There was a book that I started 10 different times called All Joy and No Fun about parenting. But I don't know. With parenting books, I think they're probably great, but it's like doctors don't go home and read books about other doctors. You want some escapism and something that doesn't have food allergies in it.
Sure.
So
that's fun. Zoe, thanks so much for doing this.
No, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to visit petermcgraw.org for more information about our guest, show notes, and social media links. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share with others. Join Dr. Peter McGraw next week for another